What's up, everybody? Welcome to Conversations with me, your host, Jason Glaze. I love having honest conversations because having honest conversations helps us love God, others, and ourselves well. Today, we will be talking to Lee Rogers. Lee is the pastor of North Georgia Church, and he is also a dear friend of mine. We are going to be talking about the importance of keeping everything relational. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe to this channel so you won't miss the upcoming conversations. And I really hope you enjoyed this one. What's up, Lee?
What's up?
Hey, thank you for doing this.
Man, I'm pumped to do this and I'm excited that you're doing stuff. It's awesome, man. I love it.
Yeah. So you and I met, I think we first officially met over a lunch years ago. I don't really count that. But we officially started like really becoming good friends, doing life together. You became my pastor 2 years ago, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I tell you what, I want to start with a very serious question. Just jump in the deep end. What is the deal with not being allowed to start eating your popcorn until the movie's completely over? How did you get there in life?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you went here right off the bat because this is very, very important. Not just for me, but for the population at large. This is a key part of the popcorn gospel, in my opinion, and just entertainment in general. So here's the deal. This is what I found in my life. This is born and learned out of experience, as many inventions and processes are. But my problem was, well, I think the problem in general is if you eat popcorn for a while, you get sick of popcorn. It can still
Yeah.
be delicious. Your mouth still kind of is trying to find the joy, but it's only a matter of time from the moment you start eating popcorn until you get tired of eating popcorn. And if that happens 3 minutes into your movie, you're missing out. You're missing the joy and excitement of putting the popcorn experience with the watching experience. No problem. I solved it. You just
You
don't eat
solved
the
it.
popcorn until the movie starts. Easy. You're welcome.
Oh, this was worth it. That was worth it right there. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
that's
So
that's
I,
the life
I,
hack.
I think, yeah, life hack. So I think I want to do this. Since this is your first time on, I really want the audience to get to know you a little bit. So just kind of give us the quick, I don't know, 5 to 10 minute version of basically your journey with how you got to where you are today as a pastor, husband, father, however direction you want to go, like whatever you think is important for people to know about you before I get into the actual topic I want to talk to you about. Give us the skinny.
Yeah, that I appreciate you asking. I think story is part of what comes to mind as I think about what we're even going to talk about today because you prompted me a little bit. But my story is, I don't know, probably similar to a lot of Americans born in the 70s, raised in the 80s kind of situation. That I grew up in suburban Atlanta and I was born to parents who were Christian coming out of the Southern Baptist world that they grew up in and sort of excited about a little bit more of a not like fully charismatic, but kind of a charismatic experience. Something about that was really appealing to them. So I was born into a life where that was going on, where my parents were very God focused, very spiritually focused, but had a lot of problems and a lot of struggles. So I grew up in this weird sort of balance of we trust God for everything and he's going to be here for us and we don't have a lot of stuff. And sometimes it was like we had no stuff. And so there was a lot of confusion there. I would learn later that much later in life about wisdom and doing things that, practical and normal things to make life work that my parents probably um, weren't as trained in. I say sometimes they were all revelation, no wisdom, which is, I don't know, good and bad in different ways. So all that to say, that all came together into a frustration in my life toward the end of my high school years, where I was trusting and believing what I had learned from my parents about God, and I was watching a lot of people whose lives looked better than mine. And so I almost made a conscious decision, but really made a decision to try the other way for a while and try to live a life of trying to have a good time and trying to have fun, and truly blazed a trail of destruction for about 9 or 10 years, from about 16, 17 years old to about 25, 26 years old. And I did my best to have fun in every way that the world offers. And sometimes it really seemed like it was fun, but it never fully delivered. There was some
Hmm.
happiness in the moment, but long term just left me broke and tired, really, for lack of a better explanation. And I would say broke as far financially, but also broke relationally in a lot of ways. Didn't have anything built up or anything to lean on, and everything just didn't quite work out ever. Wasn't quite fulfilling, and I had no idea why or what that was supposed to look like. And I had a friend who, I mean, there's a million baby step details involved, but really a friend who connected me at North Point Community Church in that time. And it was new and growing, and the whole megachurch scene was coming online. And it was a beautiful place to show up and be anonymous,
Yeah.
because you're sitting in there with a couple thousand of your closest unfriends and learning together. And Andy Stanley was the pastor there, and the guy who brought the message every Sunday. And he had this way of just sitting on a stage and having a conversation with the audience. And I felt like he was speaking to me and to my heart. And
Hmm.
I don't know what he was really saying in all those years, but what I heard was, I know you don't want to change what you're doing, but have the courage to tell God that. At least be
Mm.
honest about where you are and be honest with God, and take steps toward trusting Him with you and trusting Him to change things in your life. And so I did. Again, I gloss it up nice for a 5 minute story, but it was
Sure.
a lot of unsure baby steps in those days, and just followed really the plan that church had for my life. And it looked like getting into my first men's group of my entire life. Absolute game changer. I grew up with with tons of friends and guys and people that I was really close to, but never in an effort to grow in spiritual maturity, to grow in my faith and relationship with God. And so to do that with some other men who were on the same journey as me was an absolute game changer. And so little things changed over the years. Met Holland. She was on a very similar path, similar journey. We got married. We had our first kid, and then things were going good, living like the regular Christian life. And I went on this retreat with these men who were holding retreats for men around this message from the book Wild at Heart from John Eldridge. The idea that there's more for us in this Christian life, especially as men, like those appetites we have as men were from God. And I'd never really put things in that sort of category before. And the hunger that we have to fill a space that shows us we have what it takes and that we're powerful and all of those things were questions that all men have and God wants to answer. And so spent some time on a retreat with those guys and really saw my story in a different way for the first time. Saw some lies I had been believing in, and left that retreat a little more healed and free than I knew was possible, and that I don't know, something I didn't even expect, and so it was pretty exciting, and I wanted to share that with other men and Christian men. This idea that there's more for us right now because of what Jesus wants to do in our lives. And so that was what I feel like is really my first pull into ministry. I was working in a career in architecture, designing houses that would eventually shift into building houses, and that was going good. That was going fine, but all of a sudden, I was pulled into this um, environment of seeing men come alive, and it just got real contagious. And I wanted to see that happen more than anything else. I wanted much more than I wanted to design people's houses, and started tracking really close with those guys that were holding those retreats and learning a ton from them about walking daily with God in a way that gave life that was exciting and fun and enjoyable. And did that for a few years. By the grace of God, my industry that I was in, career wise, went away in this country. The 2008 downturn of the building industry gave
Mm-hmm.
me some space to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Ended up eventually back in school, ended up in a graduate ministry program, got hired by North Point Community Church, and got to work there for about 7.5 years, and got to work with other groups and do incredible things, seeing men come alive by the ideas of the gospel, but also the environment of spending time in relationship and conversations with other men and becoming known. And it was just beautiful and great. And in 2020, there was a shift, and felt God pulling me in a different direction. Again, like if anyone ever wants to have a longer conversation about this, I'm available, because looking back in this sort of summation, it seems like it makes sense. None of it made sense at the time. My whole life is stumbling backwards into blessings, and God had a plan. I had no idea what it was. So there was a lot of stumbling, bumbling, fumbling around into finally pastoring this little church in North Georgia, Dawsonville, Georgia, called North Georgia Church, learning what small church and deep community has really been about. You jumped on board right after I did, and it's been a ride, and we're on it, man.
Yeah,
What I leave out?
you're good, man. I think that's a good introduction, so people just can kind of know who you are and where you're coming from. Um, yeah, in the very short time that we've known each other, there's been like three major areas in my life that you've had a lot of influence over. And I want to talk about one of those today, because here's one thing I noticed about you really, really quick. It really doesn't matter the topic being discussed. It tends to be your default setting to make it relational, right? So like I was raised in a church that was very, theology was held to a very high standard, which is not a bad thing. Doctrine was held to a very high standard, which again, not a bad thing. But it kind of trained me that when I was engaging ideas, I would think about a more kind of abstract and like how they fit in boxes of truth. But I started noticing that your brain didn't work like that. That when someone would ask you a question, or when a topic was on the table for discussion, you automatically just take that thing being discussed and it automatically becomes relational. Um, can you kind of just give us, how did you get there? Have you always been that way, like since birth? Did you have to learn it? How did you get to that place?
That is a really great question that I should probably think more about. Honestly, I don't think I've been that way since birth. And I remember a time that I probably didn't think that way enough, in my opinion. But I was thinking about how to answer this question because you gave it to me yesterday and to prep me just a little bit. And I think there are several factors that come to mind. One is that when I was engaged in doing those men's retreats with those guys, I noticed very early on that almost inevitably there would be a guy either in my small group on the retreat or a guy at the retreat that I didn't like. Like something about him was just irritating. I don't know what it was. And then like sometimes I'd hear just a little snippet of his story and I'm like, yeah, I knew it. That guy's a jerk. And obviously not super healthy. But what I noticed was when I heard that guy's full story, I almost always ended up loving him.
Mm,
Something about hearing someone's story and how they became the way they became just makes sense. And it's like, oh, that guy is kind of a jerk, but I get it. Like, I would be a jerk too in that type of situation. If I had those same circumstances, I would be like that too. And so there was something about getting closer to somebody, getting on the inside that was a dynamic that helped me understand that probably there is love connecting us all more than other things. Another
mm,
thing that came to mind as I thought about this is I heard this person speak once, and I don't remember where, but they had done a big study on people in their dying days. So, interviewed a lot of people essentially on their deathbed. And the biggest regrets of people on their deathbeds are one, that they didn't take more risk in life, and two, that they weren't more relational, that they didn't care more for the relationships that mattered in their lives, their spouses, their children, their grandchildren, whatever it was. And that relational component was just really the biggest factor in those interviews. And I thought, wow, that is a big deal. So relationships, obviously a big deal. And then the third thing that comes to mind is that the idea of spending eternity with God, the idea of eternity is somewhat disturbing for me. I can't fully, I can't even partially wrap my head around it. And if I try, I get kind of freaked out. But it seems like the factor of eternity to God has everything to do with relationship with Him. And so there's
mm,
something about me that God likes so much that He wants to be connected to me eternally. Well, that's amazing in itself, but it made me start thinking about the story of God as we know it. And the more I thought about it in terms of relationship, the more it became more and more clear to me that the highest priority to God is relationships. So just this idea that it seems like there was a time where there were no humans. And then he made humans to be in relationship with them forever. And so he created us for relationship with him. Also, as we understand it, God is a Trinity, so he's already in relationship. So something about him is truly relational. Well, also, there is an enemy to our connection with God that we would call Satan. And it seems like he had relationship with God and lost it, and then set his sights on destroying our relationship with God. So
Mm.
almost, that was an annoying ding, but almost anti-relational in some sort of way. Make sure that doesn't happen again. So the enemy's anti-relational, but the story of God in the Bible is about him creating us for relationship with him, having relationship with us, the relationship being broken, God trying to reestablish relationship with a group of people in different ways, telling them the best ways to live among each other with him, and ultimately in our efforts failing, dying so that we could have eternal relationship with him. And so all
Mm.
of it together just comes back to this idea that relationships are the highest priority to God. I would say they are God's economy. The way he operates is relationally. And the currency of that economy is love, service, like giving yourself up for others in a way. And I don't know, romantic love, I suppose, fits in there, and connected familial love. All of those fit in there. They're all currencies of the relational economy. But the more I thought about it, the more I saw it, the more relationships seemed like the priority. And not only that, it made scripture come alive for me. It helped me understand so much more about who God is and why we are and all of those things and what really matters most. Is that a long winded enough answer about that
No, it's
question?
beautiful. That's perfect. It's perfect. Um, Obviously, relationships being the highest priority is a knowledge I've had, let's say for 20 years. But I think it really kicked it into overdrive in my mind when I saw it modeled by you, right?
Mm,
So, like, it's one thing to have this truth that we know this is how we should function. And, we slowly grow into that over time. That this is how we're created. God's relational. He's created us to be relational. Let's slowly grow in that over time. And I think that was happening for me. But there was something about watching it being modeled, and you seem to do it effortlessly. Um, but something to be that when you see it modeled, I don't know, it almost like it speeds up the process for me, because now I like see it in action. Like I'm in a men's group with you, and I watch somebody throw out a topic, and where that topic would normally maybe get us sideways, it doesn't get us sideways because you always bring it back to this relational component. Like, and once you bring it to that, I think what it does is it forces us to look inside.
mm,
If we just keep things like these intellectual ideas that we toy with, it's like they can stay outside of us.
mm.
But
Yeah.
once it becomes relational, now we have to like really start taking a look on the inside, right?
Yes.
So what it sounds like to me, tell me if I'm hearing this correctly, is this became like a reality for you when you really started looking at the heart of men and like what was going on. You begin to see wounds, the lies that they believed about themselves, forgiveness, like all of those heart issues. That's really where it clicked for you that this is all about relationships. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, absolutely. And even just hearing you say that, and I really appreciate your words, but even hearing you bring up that idea of modeling it for other people, I think a lot of guys modeled it for me for whatever reason. Out of God's grace and mercy for me, he put me among men who modeled that really, really well. And
Mm.
you and I have read, the a couple of books by the True Face guys, and that idea of being loved more by being known instead of being ostracized and shamed and ridiculed because people know what's on the inside of us. The idea that it can be the opposite of that we can be loved more, is just so appealing that I want that for every single person. And so when you and I are talking to men who are holding on to stuff, it's like, man, I want you to know that I love you, and there's more for you to being able to receive love if you'll just open it up. As our
Yeah.
friend Scott Dubois says, if you open up the kimono and let us know what's going on inside, it's just the opportunity that we all have to,
Yeah.
I don't know, feel fulfillment in a deeper, better way.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think the biggest hindrance is? Well, I'll tell you what. Let me ask this question first. Some people are naturally more relational than others, right?
Sure.
So, like, if we
Sure.
go to, we could pick out personality assessments, temperaments, and what we're going to find is just, not a right or wrong thing. It's just that some people are more geared toward relationships than others. So, for that person listening or watching that says, man, I get it. I hear you. I know that's important, but I really just don't like people that much. Um, but I know I need to be in relationships, but it's not natural for me. What would you have to say to them?
Yeah, that again is a absolutely great question. I apologize for those dings. I do not normally get that many texts in a row. Um, yeah, that is an absolute great question, and I want to talk to that person every single time because I also feel that person. I understand that. Like, you throw out some platitude like relationship is the highest priority to God, or you need other people in your life, blah blah blah. We all have circumstances and experiences to tell us otherwise. Because
Mm.
even in the best of situations, people will fail us, and we will fail people. We will not be there for them in their moments. And even worse, if someone's out to get us, we've shared something, we've opened up the kimono, we've opened up our heart, put it out there, and it's come back to bite us. That could be done by
Mm-hmm.
a child, a parent, a spouse, and that hurts every single time. And just like all sin, it wants to just close us up, like build a wall around this, and I will survive on this side of the wall alone. I get it. But if there is someone who is worth trusting, if there is someone that I could, just speaking as any man, I think even the man who doesn't see value in being close to another man or woman or whoever it is, um, the idea of doing life with someone who you could really trust is still appealing. Like there's something in us that's always going to get that. And I think if I sat one on one with somebody, man, woman, child, whatever, we could talk enough to ferret that out, to uncover that desire that's inside of us. I think it's put inside of us by our designer. And so it's, even if it's covered up, even if we don't see the value, it's in there somewhere. And um, yeah, and sometimes only having a taste of it can sort of spark that flame or that need, or however you say it. It kind of reminds me of my middle kid can be an obstinate kid, and when he was about 4 years old, I don't know how he made it to 4 years old without eating ice cream, but I was eating ice cream, and little Turner was walking by, and I said, "Hey, buddy, taste this." He said, "No, I don't want to taste that." It was a blob of white stuff in a bowl. I said, "Trust me, you're going to want to taste this. This is a good thing." And he starts crying. I don't want to, don't make me taste it. While he was crying, I just took my spoon and dabbed it right on his tongue, just while he was belly aching. And he froze for a second, closed his mouth. He said, ah. And he was hooked on ice cream for that moment. I
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good thing, but I feel like it's the same with relational connection. Regardless of the pain we've suffered and the difficulty and the thinking about I don't even know how to go about making more friends or getting close to somebody or something like that. When we have it, just makes us hungry to have that more and to have that
Yeah.
better. I think
Yeah.
it's why Jesus is God with us because we need
Yeah.
somebody with us and
Yeah.
we need each other even if we don't know what it looks like.
Yeah.
That answer the question?
Absolutely. Absolutely. To answer the question. I think for me, like the first time I experienced what I would call real community, where I basically just opened it up and just bared my soul, was actually I was in training. I did an internship at a ministry similar to the one I work at now. And I was in an internship, and basically they taught you how to counsel by doing it to you. And it was a awful and beautiful time of God taking me apart, put me back together. But I knew, and that was in 2002. So 22 years ago, and I knew when that was done, I'm ruined. Like I
Mhm.
got to have this the rest of my life.
Yep.
It was one of those things where I think I didn't know kind of, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know I needed that
Yes.
until I got it. And then in recovery, I experienced that even more with, just a small group of brothers and us all just trying to survive, get sober, and, learn how to live a new life without chemicals. I experienced that even to another level and left there knowing, yeah, that I can't live without this.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so for the person who is on the fence, okay, because I can think of 5, 6 people right now off the top of my head. They're on the fence that they know they need to be known. They need to be in deeper relationships with others, but the risk is just too great, right? Like you said, either they've been hurt before, or their personality just sets them up to be very private. So to where I probably share too much too fast. There's some people that that's their biggest fear is just opening up and sharing. What do they need to know in order to go ahead and cross that line and take that risk?
yeah, man, that is such a great question. Also, and I would say just about your story as you shared it a minute ago, I would argue that you did know the value of being close to other people because I would bet as a kid, you traveled in a pack as much as you could. Like you
Great
had
point.
cousins or friends or whatever. We just didn't know what all it was for or how healthy it truly was. And
Great
so
point.
yeah, and when as we become adults and as we take a lot of hits and as we see the danger out there, we pull back and we isolate, and it makes sense that we end up forgetting. But most kids don't have to be convinced that they want to be with other kids. There's safety in
Mm,
numbers, and so yeah, even though we have to relearn it as adults, it's in us, man. And again,
man.
kids gravitate together quickly. It is in them, and toward adults for that matter. They need and want someone who will trust and protect their hearts. Well, that never goes away. That is inside of us, and even if someone is very hesitant to get close to other people, open up to a group, whatever it is, it it doesn't mean that they don't want it. It may be in there, they just don't know how to get there. And just like you were saying earlier, that we try to model that for others, and it has been deeply modeled for me in incredible ways. I think it takes a lot of modeling that we have the
Mm,
opportunity to model that for others, to live that way, to model it for the people who are close to us in life. Excuse me. And um, the fact that you know 5 or 6 people who are in that boat, the fact that you know that about them tells me that they appreciate that you are that for them in their lives.
mm.
Even if they're not ready to go to a bigger public forum, even if it's 3 people, 4 people, some sort of group, something about the fact that you know that speaks to the idea that there's the hunger for it in their heart. And so
Mm.
finding those people to trust sometimes is a healthy, safe thing. I would say you can tell me you probably know better than I do. Um, but my hope for those people is that they trust it as they see it in you. They trust it as they see it in me. They trust it as they see it in someone who is experiencing the value of being known and loved by others.
Yeah. That is such a great point that we really are born knowing we need relationships.
Yes.
And we will run and pack as kids. And then I think probably one of the biggest struggles is that we think we're supposed to grow out of things that we're never supposed to grow out of. You
Yes.
know, for example, I don't want to chase a rabbit here, but think about how curious a kid is. A kid is
Yes.
so curious, and then culture has taught us that when we grow up, we're supposed to become less curious. So seeing the curiosity reawakened in a person is a beautiful thing because it's always been there. It's
Yeah.
always been there. That's
Well,
a really good point. Really good
yeah,
point.
and culture and society, they um value and praise experts, not the curious, not the learner. That's not the person that you put on your TED Talk stage. You put the expert on the TED Talk stage. And so the affirmation and the praise that that person's getting is like, oh, huh. And so just in a million subtle, tiny, different ways, um, yeah, just the world around us can tell us to not be vulnerable, not be curious, not be humble. It's not as praiseworthy or loved or lovable or lauded in some way or another. And I would wonder, this is a good question. I should ask you this question. Is that if you think about a little kid and the way that they need a parent and even need, like, I would argue that every little boy needs the affection of his father. I don't know that that goes away either. That need
Mm.
for affection from another man. And I realize that that can be very confused and used in weird ways, but where am I getting that now? Like, where are you getting that need for affection from another man?
Yes. Yes. That's a great question. So currently, you and I, for the past 2 weeks, we've been going to a homeless ministry up the road in Gainesville, Georgia. And they basically serve the homeless in the community, but they also have residents, about 14, 15 guys who are actually living there who are in the process of hopefully getting back on their feet. And you have been talking to them about what it means to be a man and how, because most of the guys in that room, I mean, only like 3 or 4 of them have really spoke up, but you kind of get the feel, I don't know if any of them really had a good, healthy father figure. Right. Um, but then to say, okay, you didn't have the father that you wanted or needed growing up. And obviously the primary goal is to turn them toward God as the father. But then also you've been teaching them how they are called to be fathers as well, right? And how they can father each other. So here's an experience I had. This was probably 2011, 2012. I was praying for God to send me that sage. So I was
Mhm.
probably around 40, 38. I was around 38, 40 years old. I was praying for God to send me that old wise sage, that could tell me things that I didn't know. Got a great relationship with my father. He's always been a great guide, my hero, great advice. But I just felt like there was, a piece missing, that I needed that mentor. God never brought it, except, let me rephrase that. God did not bring that the way I thought he would. He didn't bring it to me with an older, wiser man. He brought it to me in the form of a group
Mm.
of some guys younger than me, some guys the same age, right? I think I might have been the oldest one there. But yeah, there was there wasn't that old sage. It was actually all that I was looking for from a male figure came in the form of about 5 or 6 other guys,
Wow.
right? So, in a way, we are almost called to father each other. Now, we know God's got to be the ultimate source, but like you said last night to the homeless guys, we are conduits, right?
Yes.
We are that conduit of God's love and God's fathering from one to another. So, the person who didn't have the great father, and that day's gone. He's probably not going to be great. He's probably never going to be what you need him to be.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we're not only do we have God, we also have other humans, right?
Yes.
It's difficult for men to open themselves up to other men. And I think you touched on it earlier with the curiosity piece. Curiosity seems to equal weakness.
Mm.
Because if I'm curious, that means I don't know something, right? And knowledge equals some kind of level of, I don't know, importance. When it comes to fearing connecting with another man, um, what have you found to be the primary obstacles that a guy really has to get over before he opens himself up to a close relationship with another man?
Yeah,
Or
that's
we
a
could say women with women as well.
yes, that is another absolutely great question. And I don't know if there is a one size fits all answer for it. I will say that well, I have talked to other men about the idea of holding that silver bullet. And the silver bullet is the thing that can kill you, the thing that could take you out, the exposure of something that is part of your past, a part of your present, a part of something that you deal with or struggle with that makes you ultimately vulnerable. And I will say to anyone, I do not relish being vulnerable. Vulnerable is weakness. And um, if my deepest question is, do I have what it takes? Am I powerful? Am I strong enough to admit my weakness is not going to be the natural way to answer that question. But
Mhm.
without vulnerability, we can't learn, we can't heal, we can't connect deeply. So all let's say back to the silver bullet idea is that if I give another man the silver bullet that can take me out, he's likely to give me the silver bullet that can take him out. If
Mm.
I'm at a level of trust with a guy that I say, hey, this is where I am and this is what I've been dealing with, um, usually he'll meet me there, and we can hold that for each other. And some guys don't need that from me to be able to share, to be able to trust on that level. But if I'm holding a gun pointed at you, you're probably more comfortable when you're holding a gun pointed at me. And not that we should ever use that or eye for an eye or have that sort of thing going on, that relationship. But at the same time, it can be valuable. I have
Mhm.
another. Since you said the same for women, I have a theory that is unnecessarily validated or supported that you may have to edit out of this video. But I feel like over the years, what I have discovered is that it is easier for women to go beneath the surface relationally quickly. It takes men a little longer for whatever reason to build the trust or whatever it is. But once a man has gone below the surface, even dove, divin, I don't know the past tense of dive, dove deep with another man, he can always be there with that man. Whereas with women,
Mm.
even though they go beneath the surface, if there's not continual connection and maintenance in the relationship, they have to start over the next time they see each other, which is
Wow.
really interesting. I cannot see you for 2 years. And the next time I see you, I will be absolutely comfortable with you asking me the hard question or me asking you the hard question. But if Holland, my wife, has to call another woman who she hasn't spoken to in 2 years, even if they were way below the surface in a small group a long time ago, she needs to start at the surface and work her way back over time to be there with women. And I don't know why that is. And again,
I
it's
wonder.
important.
I wonder if the why. So, have you ever heard of the idea that men are waffles, women are spaghetti? Have you ever heard of that?
Sure, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Compartmentalization and
So, yes. So, if you look inside a man's brain, it kind of operates more like a waffle. Waffle has compartments that hold syrup. So, we're more compartmentalized. We have, work compartment, church compartment, family compartment, hobby compartments. Where women tend to, and by the way, there are always exceptions,
sure.
but women tend to be more like spaghetti to where everything touches everything,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think they can be more relational faster than we can because it's opening up that compartmental box that we have to decide if we want to do. To where women, basically everything touches everything, so everything can be relational easier. I am curious though, because I totally agree with you. Like I got buddies right now I haven't talked to in a couple of years. I can get on the phone with them. It's like we just picked right where we left off. I don't know why women seem to have a harder time with that, but that's a very interesting observation. Maybe there's some ladies watching this that can actually comment below and give us some insight on why that is, or if it is, or
Right.
even if it is.
Right.
Um,
You might be onto something with that, and I'm not going to go too far into it because I feel like I need to study more to even be in this conversation. But I think you're onto something there because uh, if you and I, or I'm going to use somebody else so no one gets a weird thought about you, but if Joe Schmo tells me he killed a man 5 years ago,
right,
and for
right,
some reason that's in my head, when I'm not with other than if I have to do something to follow the law, which I would do, um, other than that, I'm not going to care. That loop is not in my head. When I see you the next day and you say, hey, you want to grab a cheeseburger for lunch, I'm not also thinking, but Joe Schmo killed a guy. Whereas my wife may keep that loop open because she keeps it all going, kind of all the time and
right.
doesn't quite compartmentalize as much as I do.
Yeah,
It's a weird
that
example.
may be a factor for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. I'm going to kind of go back to my original question of making everything relational and making sure that we're looking at things through a relational lens. And I'm putting you on the spot with this one. This might be a little difficult to answer. Where do you think we have missed this the most as Jesus followers? Like, where do you see not making things relational? Where has that done the most damage, would you say?
Yeah, that's a absolutely beautiful and great question that I feel like I could talk about all day long. But anytime religion gets in the way of relationship, I think we're missing in one way or another because in the stories about Jesus and of Jesus, we just see time and time again where there's a group of people that are really trying to hold the law and feel very justified in doing so. They're holding the law of God as the absolute most important factor in everyone else's life around them. And Jesus just shows up and he holds the person. It seems like he holds the person and their relationship with God or with him, as the case may be, as the most important factor. Even that idea of, um, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. The law
Mm.
was all about the best way to do life in relationship, not the best way to do life under the law. So, and this is where I will probably get in trouble. I believe that
Please get in trouble. Please get in trouble. Bring it
in
on.
churches, as Holland has told me many times, that'll be a great last day of work for you if you express that idea. But I believe when churches etch their church rules in stone, they will end up fighting for something that causes them not to love someone else. I don't know
Mm.
why that is. We can make them as general as we possibly can, or as biblical as we possibly can. But at some point, it seems that you always end up fighting for the law over the relationship. And that's where I feel like the church is missed. I
Mm.
don't think I don't think that's what Jesus did. I don't think that's what Jesus had in mind. And I think it's just a battle that we have to be in, and and I don't know, something to think about and be careful about all the time. And I think those rules and the effort and the rule holders have the best intentions in mind. It starts out so right and so good, but when it allows us to either categorize someone or be very justified in not loving someone, I think that's where it breaks down. That's where we fail as a church. When you hear about church hurt stories, very often somebody was trying really hard to um, hold a rule, and somebody was really hurt by that.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Um, so most of the people I journey with and I'm in relationship with, they're in some form of leadership, right? Whether it's pastors, business owners, nonprofit directors, whatever. Like I got a lot of leaders that I journey with. So I'm imagining a lot of leaders are going to be watching this. If you're talking to whether a pastor, just any leader right now, okay, and they have realized, maybe by watching this, or this just affirmed what they already kind of were convicted of, that they have not been making relationships a priority, that they've been prioritizing, whether it's mission vision, whether it's bylaws, or whether it's trying to keep the peace or whatever. They've just realized, I've missed it. What would you say the first step to them is into changing the culture?
Wow, that also is a great question. I will just start by saying I don't know the answer to that question, and I will say that something in me wants to say, with every decision you make, especially concerning a person or a relationship, to ask God what He loves about that person. I would encourage everyone to do that all the time. But I think before that is the question, God, what do you love about me? And when we
Mm.
understand His love for us better and what He's made us to do, it starts to work out some of these issues and some of these understandings. Um, yeah, it's a tough question, but I'm trying to think of an example of my own. Like I will say for me, if I'm in a situation where someone I'm leading on the staff at church is, um, I don't know, needs to be brought in line somewhere or is doing a really weird thing, that is not helping us love others well. Well, if I don't go into that knowing who I'm made to be in the relationship and in the situation, yes, I'm called to be a pastor. Yes, I'm called to be a leader. But I know for a fact that God called me to be an encourager. So if I'm not going into that conversation, into that relationship as an encourager, then I am going to end up in a situation with an outcome that isn't what it should be, and a probably sideways energy that is not helpful for anyone. If I'm going in my false self, as a somebody who knows the answers and has it all right, and because I'm the leader, it's going to be tragic in so many different
Mm.
ways. But if I go into it knowing how much God loves that person and knowing that He's called me to encourage them, regardless of what's going to happen, and I start there, we have a much better chance of seeing life in the kingdom, seeing all that comes with that restoration, healing, correction, everything good come out of it than otherwise. So I don't know, that almost, I'm not trying to skirt an answer for a first step, but I think it's somewhere in that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Um, One thing that I noticed about you quickly as a pastor is even from stage, and I don't think, I know this is not false humility on your part. You really are approaching your job as we are figuring this out together.
Yes.
We are, we are figuring this thing out together as we go. You're not, you're not, you have not put yourself in a position where you have the answers and that, the people you're called to lead are supposed to come to you for answers.
Yes.
But the people you do lead, they do fully know that you're in it with them. Right. So I
Yeah.
do think that is a big piece. I think that is a really big piece on creating that new culture, is for a leader to say, I'm in this with you. We are figuring this thing out together, to keep that
Yes.
humble curiosity in a leader. Yeah. Good
Oh,
stuff. Good
yeah. I
stuff.
mean, I don't know how we can't. Like, there's too many questions. There's too many two things are right situations to think that we're going to have it figured out. If anyone could have had it all figured out, and apart from Jesus, then, well, actually, if we take Jesus as the example of the one who had it all figured out, he died for the world. So if you got it all figured
Mm.
out, maybe it eventually looks like that. Until then,
Ooh.
until then, maybe we're just in it together. Like even, I don't know, with so many biblical or doctrinal questions, we can honestly say that the Bible says both on so many issues.
Mm.
But to not admit that, I
Right.
feel like is, I don't know, it's a it's I don't know, narrow minded, or um I don't know, maybe it would be my pride getting in the way to not admit that I just don't know the answer. I have not got everything
Right.
right in my life. So until I do, we are figuring it out together.
Well, Lee, let's keep figuring it out together.
I'm in.
All right, man. Listen, I really appreciate you. I know you're going to be back whenever I have a topic that I know that it would be really fun to tease that topic out with you. I hope you come back several times.
Me too, man. I will do whatever you say anytime you say it. Let's go.
All right, man. This has been fun.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
See ya.